Rob, if you don't mind.
Great, thank you very much, Maurice. And good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I am Rob Hale, the founder and Chief Operating Officer of Travel and Relax. And I'm honored to be working with our company's CEO and tonight's moderator, Maurice Washington, my wife, Lisa, who serves as our Director of Celebrations, and an amazing behind the scenes staff of Max Ratkai and James Bamati, who help us in our ongoing efforts to always provide top level customer service to all of our guests. Travel and Relax was founded 16 years ago on August 1st, 2004, with the mission to unify the world one traveler at a time. These tours began in June of 2020 as COVID-19 challenged our world and dramatically changed how people travel. In the last several months, travel has morphed to involve a lot more moving parts to consider when planning your trip. Some examples include mask requirements in airlines, airports, and hotels, temperature checks at different travel facilities, and constantly changing COVID-19 border restrictions and requirements, both internationally and domestically. Because of this, the need for a true travel professional to help guide you as you plan and set up your trip, and a solid destination expert who can support you once you've arrived at your destination is needed now more than ever. As Travel and Relax considered how we could help you escape the stresses of today's world, we felt that offering you virtual tours around the world to some of the world's great destinations would provide you a great escape from today's stresses, all from the comfort of your own environment. Our major tours are being held bi-monthly, with regional tours being held every other month. All of our tours allow you to dream of future travel experiences you might enjoy. Tonight, we are very pleased to offer you our 5th tour of Tokyo, Japan, which will be presented by our special guest, Japan expert, John McMillan with Inside Japan Travel Group. Before John begins, while we do want to hear from you, to prevent the distractions of background noise, as Maurice mentioned, all attendees will be muted. There will be a question and answer period at the end, and if you have questions, please enter it in the chat box or raise your hand in the participants box. Our moderator will make sure that your questions get asked. And now I'm very excited and pleased to introduce to you John McMillan.
Hi, everybody. I'm John, and I am with Inside Japan, as Rob mentioned, and I'm really, really excited to share one of my favorite cities on the planet with you tonight. So I'll go ahead and open up my presentation, and we'll explore Tokyo together. All right. So just a little bit about me to kind of kick things off so you know sort of where I'm coming from. I have a long history with Japan. I started out there when I was 11, and I lived off and on in different places around the country for about 7 years in total. I started out on the west side of Japan near the city of Nagasaki on a Navy base. My dad was in the Navy. And so we spent a couple of years there, and then we moved towards the area of Tokyo. So this is where I had my first experiences in the city. And we lived near the city of Yokohama, actually, in Kanagawa Prefecture. You can see on the map there in the middle. And during this time when I was growing up in Japan, I really cultivated my fascination and my love of the country. And it really kind of set the course for the rest of my life. After college, I went back and I taught English in Fukui. You can see it on the map on the Japan Sea there. And I spent a couple years there at a local middle school where I got to travel kind of really extensively around the country, being an adult. So, but one place that I keep going back to again and again and again is Tokyo. It's definitely a can't miss destination in Japan. If you're curious about the picture, that is me looking across Lake Kawaguchi at Mount Fuji. So I'm an avid hiker, love to get outdoors and that sort of thing too. All right, so let's start digging in to Tokyo. So Yeah, Tokyo is a fascinating city. It's not huge by landmass standards, but it does house some 35 million people in the greater metropolitan area, um, which is surprising because, you know, basically about 30% of Japan's land is arable, and so 70% mountainous. So all of the people who live in Japan have to live in that 30% of the land. And Japan as a whole is about the size of California. So imagine 127 million people in California and 35 million people in the greater LA area, something like that, to give you kind of an idea of size there. But it's a really fascinating place to visit. I would say predominantly because you can experience kind of ancient traditional architecture, you know, culture, traditions, that sort of thing, right alongside very, very modern architecture and technology and that sort of thing, all just walking down the street. So every day, every place that you go in the city is really, really fascinating. Um, just a little bit of history. Tokyo's actually only been the capital of Japan since 1868. And that was when the original imperial family took over the country again from the samurai, the shoguns, who had been ruling it for the previous several hundred years. And just a quick trivia for you. Tokyo actually just means East Capital. So pretty straightforward, but cool. So we'll go. Treat. I'm not sure if folks out there have seen the documentary Jiro's Dreams of Sushi. Um, well, I also like to say that Japan is not just all about fish. However, it is a lot about fish. So here's a shot of me and some of my friends and my wife outside one of the small sushi establishments in Tsukiji Fish Market. So if you do eat fish, I absolutely recommend getting some of the first catch of the day when you're in Tokyo, some point in your trip. The restaurants open probably at 5 a.m. or so, something around that. And I know sushi maybe seem like an odd choice for breakfast, but it's exceptionally satisfying, and the atmosphere is unbeatable. You go into these tiny little restaurants that seat 8 or 10 people, and you kind of like squeeze in kind of normal times. But really, really an excellent option for your time there. I always like to show this. So I mentioned that food doesn't have to be extremely expensive in Japan. This is a shot of me and a mountain of soba noodles. Those are buckwheat.
Oh, look, Lauren.
And so, this whole meal cost me $5. And that was the freshest, best feature form. Um, another really awesome place to eat across Tokyo are called izakaya, and that's a Japanese One kind of quick note about dietary requirements. So, if you have kind of food allergies or you eat a specific diet, it's kind of essential, I'd say, for you to work with a travel professional to help plan your trip so that you can make sure that you can take full advantage of all the food that Japan has to offer. Reason being is that kind of food allergies and that sort of thing are relatively new in Japan. And so they're not well understood widely. And so that sort of thing. So it's really kind of essential to have someone to support you through the trip. So like I said, you can make the most of the food all across the city. All right. So now I'm going to talk about some really fun things to do around Tokyo. I always like to start with tea ceremony. A lot of people are familiar with tea ceremony, have heard of tea ceremony, maybe have experienced tea ceremony. But it's really holds a lot of Japanese culture in a very kind of simple, tradition. So what's going on with tea ceremony is it was originally developed to be able to show kind of a host's appreciation for someone who's visiting. And all of the motions of the ceremony and all of the, like the exact water temperature and, kind of the prescribed movements that they're going through are all kind of, they've been cultivated over centuries to really instill like a sense of calm in the person who's receiving the tea and the person who's preparing the tea for the guest. The great thing about this is it is a very relaxing experience, and it's also not a very long one. You can experience a full tea ceremony within underneath an hour. So there's a number of places to do this around the city, but I definitely recommend trying it. And if you've never tried the green tea itself, matcha, that's the whisked green tea powder, it's also a real treat. I'm a big fan. Some folks have tried green tea ice cream. I think that's been popularized in Japanese restaurants in the US, at least. And you can also get green tea flavored other sorts of desserts. They even sell green tea Kit Kats in Japan. One of my favorite seasonal treats. Another really hands-on kind of experience that I recommend to everybody going, especially for kind of families or couples or friend groups, is Taiko drumming. So this is a traditional Japanese art form of group drumming. So you can see in the picture there, the kind of like large wooden drums with the hide cover on them. I don't think they're made of animal anymore, but that's kind of the traditional make of those drums. But going to an instructor's place of practice to learn the kind of basic rhythms and how to kiai, which is like a call that you make while you're drumming in between the beats with your friends or family, is really an unforgettable experience. You can actually see I had a broken leg or a broken ankle in that picture, but didn't stop me from drumming. So another great thing I like to say, I like to make a plug for how convenient Tokyo's subway system is. But getting around can be a lot more kind of like satisfying, and you can definitely kind of connect the various districts around Tokyo a lot better if you go around by bicycle. So this is a really awesome way to kind of tour the city in warmer months to really get, a read on where everything is located and get a real internal feel for the layout of the city. And how things are connected. Because, if you just kind of like pop into the subway and pop up somewhere else in the city, it kind of feels like a teleporter, and you don't really have that mental map of what's going on across the city. So I always really like to promote kind of cycling tours and that sort of thing across the city as a great way to see a lot and get a good feel for it. Another really fun thing you can do in Tokyo is martial arts. So, some folks in the US have experienced, either karate or other kinds of, practice in the States. I personally did Japanese fencing, which is called kendo. And so one of my times in Tokyo, I took a class in sword cutting, drawing and cutting technique. And so you can see the kind of pictures from that here. You know, you definitely don't have to do anything that intense. You know, there's certainly opportunities to experience or just watch, you know, different types of martial arts across the city. And, you know, one thing that a lot of people like to go see because it's very unique to Japan is sumo wrestling. And so Tokyo has a grand national sumo tournament 2 or 3 times a year in Tokyo. So, you know, if that's of interest to you, you know, you definitely want to work with a professional to plan your trip around the dates of those tournaments themselves. But I was never really interested in sumo until I went and saw it in person. And then I was totally sold. It's really a fascinating martial art. Going to kind of go to the traditional arts again here, performing arts, Kabuki. I'm not sure if you all have heard of Kabuki before, but it's a traditional theater art form that probably the most famous Kabuki stage is located in Ginza in Tokyo. So what's great about this is, you know, nowadays you can actually get a headset that has a translation of the play that you're seeing at the theater. So you kind of know what's going on in English. But, you know, Kabuki is really known for its kind of flamboyant costumes and, you know, really intense kind of acting and that sort of thing. And the crowd actually really gets into it. And a lot of people who know the plays that they're seeing and have seen them many times will call out lines and stuff to the actors on the stage. Another unique thing about this art form is that it's traditionally been only male actors that play all the parts on stage. So kind of an interesting one to see there. And then, you know, these are just a kind of a handful of examples, but there's just kind of endless things to do in Tokyo that, you know, you could stay for years, never get bored and never do it all. But I always like to say, take a moment of repose at the end of your day and relax in one of Tokyo's many wonderful gardens. So, you know, I think Tokyo has kind of more green space than any other major city that I've been to. And they're all well manicured and kind of built to kind of get kind of mental relaxation and take a break from all of the high-rise towers and rushing cars and things. So another thing I always like to promote, I kind of mentioned it briefly in the beginning, but you know, you can see a shot here of me and my friends jumping in front of the gate at Meiji Shrine. Meiji Shrine is the largest shrine in Tokyo, and the grounds are covered in trees, like you can see there. So there are no kind of modern type buildings on the property there. And all of the shrine buildings themselves have traditional wooden architecture, you know, with interlocking pieces, no nails, that kind of thing. And that's a traditional building form that you can see, you know, for yourself. So you have that in the center of the city, you know, kind of right next to these giant high rises, you know, with modern building and architectural techniques. So, you know, it is just really satisfying to be able to see those kind of mashed together every day when you're going around the city. And kind of speaking of architecture, you know, Tokyo is home to world-class museums across, you know, various districts all around the city. You know, and you can see sort of art pieces around. The one on the right is of Ueno Park, which has a number of museums kind of around it, sort of like the mall in Washington, D.C. You can go from museum to museum and spend days, you know, seeing modern art, traditional art, you know, world art, Japanese art, that sort of thing. One of the new exhibits in the city is the Hokusai Museum. Hokusai is arguably the most famous woodblock painter. You'll probably recognize that shot of Mount Fuji with the tsunami wave coming through. But, you know, just kind of, like I said, you know, if you're walking through Shinjuku, which is basically one of the major business districts in the city, you know, you have kind of street art pieces as well, just scattered around the city. So just walking around is a real pleasure. Another really cool draw for Tokyo specifically, more so than kind of Japan itself, is its really strong link to modern pop culture. So, what's cool about this is that, it's of course really popular with younger folks, but, you know, anybody who's going to Japan, looking to kind of experience one of those only in Japan sort of, elements of the culture, should really check out, some of these elements in Tokyo as well. So, I grew up as a big gamer, so, nods to Nintendo there. There's a couple districts in Tokyo that are really targeted towards people interested in video games or animation or comic books, that sort of thing. One is called Akihabara, which is the electronics town. You can also get all manner of old electronic equipment, that sort of thing, old computer components, as well as like modern gadgets like the newest Nikon lenses and that kind of thing. But in addition to that, if you're into animation, another really popular stop kind of while you're in Tokyo is the Studio Ghibli Museum. Not sure if you're all familiar with that animation studio, but they won an Academy Award for the movie Spirited Away in the early 2000s. And so it's really world renowned at this point, but makes some of the most beloved films in Japan. And I guess I could probably relate it to a Japanese Disney almost. It has that kind of far-reaching impact in the animation world. Another really fun place to go in Tokyo is the district of Harajuku. And you can see the girl there with the kind of pink garb on. So this is kind of the youth fashion district in Tokyo. It is really fun to kind of go and see or like pop into the shops that are around there to see the really unique and kind of, flamboyant outfits that are sold there and that people wear around in the area. And if you're interested in getting dressed up yourself, there are opportunities for that as well. So there's a picture of me and Sonic the Hedgehog. I found him wandering the streets around the arcades in the district of Ikebukuro, another gaming district. And you can see a picture of me with Ultraman there as well. So, definitely if you have clients or, if you're interested in this sort of thing, definitely look at, work with a professional to get those, kind of maps and things prepped so you can really take the most advantage of it when you're in Tokyo. All right, so you got a huge city, lots of people, lots of places to go around. Where do you stay? I like to recommend 3 different districts in Tokyo based on there being a lot of things to do in the area. My favorite probably is the district of Asakusa, and that's the traditional side of Tokyo, where it's home to the largest temple in the city. And there's also a ton of places to eat, and it's by the river, and it's also by the new Tokyo Sky Tree. So that's the kind of tallest tower in Japan now. Not this guy is the Tokyo Tower. He's the old tallest tower. But yeah, so Asakusa is a really great place to stay. Shinjuku is another really great place to stay, and it's on the west side of the city. There's, again, tons of places to eat, lots of great gardens around there, and it's a really central transportation hub, so you can easily get anywhere else in the city you'd like to go. And the kind of third place is an area called Shiodome, and it's home to the Park Hotel. This picture on the left there, you can see of the hotel room with the murals painted on the walls. They have a whole level that's artist rooms, basically, where they had artists and residents come and stay for as long as they wanted in the room. And then, the only, caveat was to paint the walls in their own art style. So, that's a really cool option, if you're going to look into book well in advance. So I always like to kind of throw that one out there because I like putting in the art. All right. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about when to go. So, I know a lot of us, are kind of, it's tough to plan when to go based on what your work schedule is, or what school schedules are for, the kids, or if you're working in the schools, that sort of thing. Um, and I'll just go over kind of each season and talk a little bit about what's great about the season, and maybe what's not as great about the season. So a lot of folks have heard of the cherry blossoms in Japan, right? So it's really a gorgeous time to be in the city. The pink flowers are opening. People are coming out and doing more things outdoors. It's a great kind of communal experience. So weather is mild. It's kind of in between the colder temperatures of winter and the rain of the summer. So it's really a pleasant time to be in Japan. And I definitely recommend it for folks that are interested in having those mild temperatures. However, it does draw the crowds to Tokyo. Some of the busiest times I've ever seen the parks in Tokyo are during cherry blossom time, because a lot of basically what Japanese folks will do, whether with their offices or with their families and friends, they'll come and they'll stake out kind of places to sit underneath the cherry blossoms and eat together and drink together, that sort of thing. And so you can see in the shot here, just kind of like a sea of people. It's kind of like that in most parks and areas around Tokyo during cherry blossom time. So if you love people, it's the best. But if you are a little bit leery of the crowds, you might want to look for suggestions to experience the cherry blossoms in more remote parts of Japan. Talking about summer. So, I mentioned it is kind of the rainy season, and it does get pretty hot. I like to correlate Japan's, weather to be a little bit like the East Coast of the US. I grew up in Virginia kind of before I was in Japan. And, you get hot and humid summers, in the 90s and that sort of thing. But the really cool thing about summers in Japan is, it's kind of low season. So the cost of your trip could be a little less. And when you get into August, August is a really important cultural time in Japan. The middle of August is a holiday season called Obon, which is where Japanese people go back to their hometowns, to their parents' houses and relatives' houses, and they pray for their ancestors. And this is one of the only times of the year that the ancestors can actually come and join the party. So it's a really big festive time of year. They have fireworks, they have dancing, street dancing, scripted dancing, food stalls that are set up around the towns to celebrate this time of year. So culturally, it's a really awesome time to be in the country, if you're okay with the kind of heat and humidity that it brings. Moving on to fall. What are the major draws in the fall is, of course, again, mild temperatures and the gorgeous maple leaves. So Japan has planted, maple trees all across the country, and in all the parks and naturally as well, naturally occurring maples. And so, if you're going to go visit Tokyo in the fall, I highly recommend, going around the city and experiencing the fall leaves. Also, you can take day trips out of the city. I'll talk a little bit about a couple options for day trips at the end of the presentation as well. But that's going to be a major draw for a lot of people. So kind of like spring, you'll have the crowds in the city as well in the fall too. Last but not least, winter. What's winter like in Tokyo? Well, I'd say this is one of the coolest seasons to be in Tokyo, pun intended. The temperatures are a little bit lower, but rarely get below freezing. But they kind of before Christmas, they light up the whole city, right? And so they call it illumination. And so sort of like we would do Christmas lighting here, different buildings and parks and that sort of thing are all full of, kind of festive lights, which is, really kind of a romantic time to be in the city, I would say. I love that this tree there next to Rainbow Bridge has the heart instead of a star on the top. Another kind of interesting point about the holidays in Japan, Christmas Eve is actually a couple's holiday in Japan. So, it became such a kind of commotion over the years with restaurants, because basically you had to be able to book a restaurant for, you know, your girlfriend or boyfriend so that you could go together on Christmas Eve, that they had to kind of start lottery systems and that kind of thing um, over the years. So yeah, it's a really cool time to be there. Moving into the New Year's holiday. New Year's is kind of the other most special holiday season of the year. It's one of the few times a year that Japanese folks can get off of work, pretty much across the board. So the whole country pretty much shuts down around New Year's. You know, aside from essential kind of you know, like accommodations and services and that kind of stuff. But you know, you'll notice a lot of restaurants closing because people are spending time with their families and that kind of thing. So it's kind of cool. People will go to a shrine and temple near where they live for the first time in the new year. It's called Hatsumode, which is a really cool thing to see. You know, people kind of like throw money and stuff at the altars at the front of the shrines, and pray for a good year to come. You know, another thing that happens over this time is that the emperor will make an address at the imperial palace on the 2nd or 3rd of January. So that's another kind of really interesting cultural thing to see in Tokyo, if you happen to be there over this time frame. And then kind of January and February are another low season. You know, there's not a whole lot of travel happening in the city at that time. You know, the temperatures are colder, you know, kind of like, you know, 30s, 40s ish. But, you know, you don't have that kind of competition for seeing things as you would during the milder seasons. So couple last plugs for winter. The food is also the best in the winter. You know, I mentioned that not all food is about fish, but I am going to mention fish in reference to winter, because you have those colder water currents coming up from the Pacific Ocean, which bring more nutrients to the fish. And then the fish kind of percolate through the whole Japanese food cycle. You know, a lot of Japanese dishes they use a powder called dashi, which is a fish powder, as a flavoring in a lot of boiled dishes and that sort of thing. So not only that, but the fishes that are caught and other seafood that are caught over winter have more flavor than they do the rest of the year. So that's a kind of personal plug. But you know, other kind of really cool things in the winter. I'm also a big hot springs guy. So hot springs are a big thing in Japan. And I always feel like you get a better experience in the winter when you're using a hot spring bath. So couple thoughts for you there based on when you want to go and what your kind of preferences are. Cool. All right. So this is probably the most boring slide I have, so apologies in advance, but I want to make sure you're feeling comfortable. Getting around Tokyo at first glance looks crazy. So you see that map of the trains and the subways and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to do this, but you will. It's really, it just takes a little bit of time. I do always recommend having a guide kind of the first day that you're in Tokyo to help you get used to the transportation system, and you know, to kind of like teach you how to use the metro cards, how to navigate the stations and get to and from places. But rest assured, you know, all signs are going to be in English and Japanese. So if you know where you're trying to get to, you know, it's not too difficult. And I can't say this enough. Everything is immaculately clean and on time. You know, we always like to joke that the best place to go to the bathroom in Japan is actually the train station because they keep it so clean. Another interesting thing is that you won't find a whole lot of trash cans around the city because everybody is so conscientious about their trash. So really, culturally, what you do is if you have an empty kind of container or something that you've had food or drink in, you put it in your bag and you carry it home. And then you kind of separate it out into the various trash types that they have at your home. At any rate, so, you know, looking at getting around the city, predominantly you're going to be using the subways or the above ground train systems. The city also has a bus system, but it's a little less convenient. And you can really get everywhere that you want to go on the trains and subways. So have fun. I love it. Cool. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about, you know, who is Japan for? The quick answer here, kind of spoiler alert, it's everybody. So, Japan is exceptionally safe. So it's really great for families or, solo travelers, that sort of thing, or people who are maybe a little bit more nervous about traveling, that sort of thing. It's definitely one of the top safest countries on the planet. I have another kind of story about, I was helping somebody with their trip at one point, and he calls me from Japan and he says, "Oh, John, I left my bag in a taxi while on the way to the train station." And I said, "Okay, yeah, we'll see if we can get it back. We'll see if we can, contact the taxi company or that sort of thing." So I said, "Can you describe the bag? Where did you lose it?" He's like, "Oh, it was in Shinjuku. It was a black duffel bag." And so I said, "Okay, well, what was in the bag?" And he said, "Oh, it had $10,000 worth of camera equipment, my passport, and a couple $1,000 in cash." So the guy was a videographer. And so I practically, threw up when I heard this. I was like, "Oh no!" At any rate, so yeah, we connected very quickly with the taxi company and the police department in Shinjuku and that sort of thing. And they had located the bag and they had it in custody. And luckily, he was able to come back. He had moved on in his trip to the next destination, but he came back to get the bag. And when he got the bag, it had 10,000, like all the camera equipment, all the cash, and his passports. Nothing had been touched. So, valuables in Japan are very, very safe. It's amazing. You can see the picture of this child at the train station. Parents will send their kids alone, to go to school and that sort of to and from school at a very young age in elementary school, even. So it's tremendously safe. So really, really good. And there's something for everybody across, whether it's you're looking at doing, traditional temples, or you're interested in history, or you're interested in the pop culture, or you're going to relax, or you're going to eat, kind of eat your way through Japan. It's really great for everybody. One of the, kind of, I guess, types of trips that we like to plan a lot is, of course, kind of special occasion travel, honeymoons, that sort of thing. I gave a nod earlier in the presentation to the level of dedication to people's craft in Japan, right? And so this translates straight through to level of service you're receiving from everybody who you're meeting across the country. Everyone takes exceptionally good care of you. And so, if you're really looking to really make it special and have those unforgettable experiences, it's a really excellent honeymoon destination. And Tokyo is an extremely romantic city as well. Talk about those kind of high-rise dinners with scenes over the city like this. It's really an excellent option. And we also, love to plan family trips to Japan. Japan is exotic and different and exciting and new, and you can do your hobbies in Japan. So anything you're interested in here, you can also see how it's done in Japan and correlate that in your trip. We like to, get people really active and outdoors and see a lot of the country, see a lot of the city. We mentioned all those kind of hands-on activities. There's also kind of like kids museums across the city, and just kind of keep people moving. Kids especially really like different modes of transportation. So you can get on that bicycle and you can see the city, or get on an electric bike and kind of explore on your own. Or, get on the subways, get on the trains, see all of those different things, and just going around the city and being in it is really kind of a quintessential family experience, I would say, getting around Tokyo. And depending on how much time you have, I want to recommend a couple of day trips as well from the city that are kind of within an hour distance or an hour travel from the city. The first one is the town or city of Kamakura. Now, Kamakura was another former capital of Japan. It was only a capital for about a little over 100 years, but it's a really kind of cute seaside town. you can actually surf there if you're into surfing, that sort of thing. But I'd say the main draw for most international visitors is probably the Great Buddha, who's sitting there in front of you. He has kind of a whole temple dedicated to him in the city there. But there's also a really cool shrine and really cool kind of like coffee shops and little places to eat, that sort of thing. It's a nice kind of escape from the hustle and bustle of Tokyo, and it's only about 40 minutes outside the city. And you can kind of walk around the whole area and see most of what you'd want to see in Kamakura in a day. So you'll feel pretty satisfied after going there. The second day trip that I like to highlight is the national park known as Nikko. And this is a little over an hour north of Tokyo. And it is the final resting place of a man named Tokugawa Ieyasu. And so this is arguably the most famous man in Japanese history. And he is credited with unifying the country. And so what that means is basically he beat all the other samurai and took over. So this is where he's enshrined, but it's in a gorgeous national park. And, you can see these kind of immaculate and intricate shrines and temples here. There's a whole complex kind of really close to the train station. But because it's a national park, you can also see one of Japan's tallest waterfalls. And you can also, if you decided you wanted to kind of branch out and do an overnight stay in a Japanese accommodation, a Japanese, inn, that sort of thing, a ryokan, you can do it at Lake Chuzenji, which is just kind of up the hill from the train station in this town. Really, really a gorgeous and serene area. And then I guess what trip would be complete without a stop at Tokyo Disney? So Tokyo Disneyland is located about 30 minutes to the east of downtown Tokyo. So it's really close and easy to get to. So you can be staying in the main part of Tokyo and take a day trip out to Disneyland or Disney Sea. Or you can stay right there, around the parks. So, they're really convenient. Disneyland and Disney Sea are located on a monorail loop from each other, and there are kind of accommodations dotted around there. I've been to Disneyland. I have not yet been to Disney Sea. It's definitely on my list for the next time I get back out there. But the cool thing there is that Disney Sea is the only property like that of the Disney properties in the world. So, for Disney fans, I'd say it's definitely an essential stop on the trip. Most folks will do kind of a 3-day pass, where you go to one of the parks, then the other park, and then you get to choose which park you go to again on the third day. And that's a really great option, especially for families that want to do a lot at the parks with their kiddos and stuff, or if you're just a Disney fan and you want to spend a lot of time at the parks. So, really, even if you're not a Disney fan, I say it's definitely worth the stop, because you get to see kind of Disney from with a Japanese lens. So, there's kind of the goods that you could buy in the souvenir shops and that sort of thing, will often have Japanese themes to them or Japanese writing on them, which I think is really, really cool. It's really unique, something that's really fun as keepsakes, I would say, when you're going through the parks. But that's what I've got for tonight. So I hope you enjoyed and learned a few things about Tokyo and Japanese culture and what there is to do around the city. And I believe we're going to go ahead and open it up to any questions that came through while I was presenting.
Thank you so much, John, for that presentation. You ended off with a bang with this for Tokyo Disneyland. I never even knew those two went together. So I'm officially sold, so good, and I got it. We have a lot of great feedback regarding Tokyo. It looks like some people that are here joining us this evening have been there, and we got amazing light tonight. And let's see here, we got people saying that we should put it on their list to go. We also have Amy C, who said that they traveled to Japan November 2019. So actually, I have a question from Rob. real quick.
Sure.
What is the recommended number of days to visit for a first-time visitor?
Yeah, so I well, it's kind of a joke, but I say as many days as you have, or as you can get. But I'd say at least 3. Staying kind of 3 nights would be the minimum that I'd recommend. Last time that I spent a good chunk of time in Tokyo, I stayed 7 days, which was fantastic. You can kind of see the main sites in those kind of core 3 days. But if you have other interests, it's really great to spend extra time, especially if you're going to tack on Disneyland or some of those day trips. You can kind of see the core of the city in 3 days, and a day or so at Disney, a day or so doing those kind of the day trips outside the city. So yeah, I'd say at least a week would be really great.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's a good question.
We have a COVID question. Are there any
Sure.
COVID restrictions or policies to be aware of?
Yeah. So right now, Japan is not open yet to travel to. There's a 14-day quarantine for people who are residents and that sort of thing. So those are the only folks that are coming in and out of Japan right now. But folks in Japan are being, very cautious, very careful with the virus, and establishments, like restaurants and hotels and that sort of thing have, double, triple, quadrupled their cleaning procedures, that sort of thing. So to keep people safe, and as far as numbers go, Japan's kind of cases are relatively low, especially compared to the size of the country. So, we're waiting for kind of official word as to when international visitors are going to be able to, start coming back again. So we're hopeful it's as soon as possible.
Great. Were there any other questions? Well, Carolyn, she said, thank you. Very interesting. Definitely on her bucket list. Nice. We have Jason with great stuff, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Yeah. And so here's what I would like to do. Sounds like we're hitting the end. I wanted to, first of all, acknowledge all our guests here, Mona, James, Jason, Carolyn, Mariah, and Suzanne, Carol, Maria, Amy C., Stanley, Alyssa, and also Lisa and Rob. Thank you guys for taking your time this evening and joining us in discovering Tokyo. Obviously, there's a lot to see here, and I want to thank John for taking us to this tour and taking us, to a great in-depth detail as to what Tokyo is about and creating an experience for us. I wanted to thank all of you guys for taking the time out of your schedules this evening to join us, and we hope to see you guys join us on a monthly basis with each of our other locations. But I want to turn it over to Rob if he has any final words.
Great, thanks very much, Maurice, and thank you very much, John, for having presented the excellent presentation tonight. It was exceptional. And I do want to advise everyone to invite you to please join our next tour if you're interested on March the 3rd, when we will be presenting to you a regional tour of unique winter activities in Anchorage, Alaska and surrounding areas. Registration is currently available on our events page at travelnrelax.com. And also on the website, we invite you to check out our event page archives, where you can find replays of our past tour destinations which we have presented. Should you have any follow-up questions on Japan or have any other travel-related questions that we can assist you with or service you with, we'd be happy to help you with that. And please feel free to contact us. And like Maurice, I just want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your evening to join us tonight. And thank you for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.